about your day so far. The moment you woke up, you probably looked at a glowing screen, a notification pinged, you grabbed a coffee, maybe a quick pastry, then came lunch, the afternoon snacks, the energy drinks to push through the slump, the endless scrolling, and maybe some late night takeout while watching a show. We live in a world of absolute relentless input. We never actually stop consuming. But I have been wondering lately, what happens to us biologically when all of that noise finally stops? When we just pause?
It is a fascinating question because that pause is exactly what modern humans are missing. We are culturally terrified of emptiness. But inside the body, when you stop feeding it, when you enforce a state of temporary scarcity, your systems do not just shut down in panic. You actually boot up one of the most sophisticated, ancient survival programs we possess. It is a biological process known as autophagy.
Autophagy. It sounds like a concept pulled straight out of a science fiction novel, but if you break down the root words, it translates literally to self-eating, right? Which honestly sounds a little alarming at first glance.
It does sound a bit morbid, but it is actually the ultimate form of cellular recycling. Imagine a massive bustling city that never sleeps, never stops producing goods, but also never bothers to take out the trash. Eventually, the streets become completely impassable. Our cells are very much like that city. Over time, they accumulate damaged proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, and oxidative stress. Autophagy acts as the body's internal, highly intelligent cleanup crew. It identifies that biological debris, dismantles it, and repurposes the raw materials to create fresh energy.
So it is essentially like clearing the corrupted files from a sluggish computer operating system. You are deleting the junk data so the whole system can run smoothly again.
That is an excellent analogy. Autophagy is biological optimization through selective removal, but the catch is, this cleanup crew does not clock in when you are constantly digesting food. If your insulin levels are continually spiked from a mid-morning snack, a heavy lunch, and a late-night meal, your body is receiving a constant blaring signal to grow and store. It never receives the signal to repair.
Which makes perfect sense when you look back at human evolution. For the vast majority of our history, we did not have delivery apps in our pockets. We evolved through natural cycles, periods of feasting, sure, but those were always followed by periods of fasting. Natural scarcity. It seems like modern civilization has completely engineered that rhythm out of our lives.
We absolutely have, and we are paying a massive biological price for it. We were designed for oscillation, activity and rest, light and darkness, feeding and fasting. Today, most people remain in a nearly constant fed state. There are actually nutrient-sensing pathways in the body that control this. One is called mTOR, which drives growth, and another is AMPK, which acts like an energy inspector. When you are always eating, the builder is working overtime. But during a fast, the builder rests, and the inspector comes out to see what needs to be fixed.
I love that visual, the builder and the inspector. It really shifts the perspective on what fasting actually is. It is not just starving yourself or skipping a meal to lose a few pounds. It is fundamentally rewriting the biological instructions you are sending to your cells.
Precisely. You are changing the entire signaling environment. The body interprets the absence of food not as a crisis, but as a signal to optimize. It shifts away from energy storage and moves towards survival efficiency. It starts looking inward for fuel, which is when it finds those weak, damaged cellular components and decides to burn them for energy.
I want to dig into one specific part of this process that I find completely mind-blowing, and that involves mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. How does this metabolic silence affect them? Because we hear constantly that mitochondrial dysfunction is the root of so much aging and chronic disease.
This is where the biology gets incredibly elegant. There is a specialized version of this cleanup process called mitophagy. Mitochondria take a lot of wear and tear. They generate the energy that keeps us alive, but in doing so, they produce oxidative stress. Over time, they get damaged and inefficient. During a fast, the body actively hunts down these weak mitochondria and dissolves them.
Like pruning the dead branches off a tree so the whole thing can grow back stronger next season.
That is exactly how it works. By pruning those weak branches, you make room for new, highly efficient mitochondrial networks to form. You are literally upgrading your cellular energy grid. And since mitochondrial resilience dictates everything from how fast you age to how quickly you recover from an injury, this process is deeply connected to longevity itself.
That brings up something I have noticed, and I know many others report this too. When you get past that initial hunger pang of a fast, there is this sudden, incredibly sharp mental clarity. The brain fog just evaporates. If the body is supposedly deprived of external energy, why does the brain feel like it is running on a supercomputer?
It is a brilliant paradox. You would naturally assume that less food equals less brain power, but the brain is highly responsive to your metabolic state. When you fast, your body depletes its glucose reserves and starts producing ketones from stored fat. The brain absolutely loves ketones. They are a highly efficient, clean-burning fuel source that produces less oxidative stress than glucose.
So the clean fuel is literally clearing the neurological noise.
Yes. And the mechanism goes even deeper. Fasting lowers systemic inflammation and increases the production of a protein called BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You can think of BDNF as high-grade fertilizer for your neurons. It promotes the growth of new neural pathways and protects the existing ones. Evolutionarily, this makes perfect sense. If you are in a state of scarcity, your brain needs to be razor sharp so you can figure out how to survive and find your next meal.
Wow, so that mental clarity is actually an ancient evolutionary mechanism to keep us alive. But it makes me think about the philosophical side of all this. We are so conditioned by modern society to fear emptiness. An empty schedule means you are not productive. An empty stomach means you need to fix it immediately. We equate constant consumption with success and safety.
That is the profound tragedy of modern convenience. We have equated abundance with health, but continuous consumption is actually a form of biological trauma. We are feeding and stimulating ourselves into a state of chronic exhaustion. Constant glucose availability, constant dopamine hits from our screens, constant environmental input. The human nervous system and metabolic engine never get a moment of silence to just catch their breath.
It almost feels like fasting is an act of rebellion against modern culture, a way to reclaim a piece of our ancient biology. But I do want to play devil's advocate for a moment, because the internet has taken fasting and turned it into an extreme sport. You see people doing these massive punishing fasts, pushing themselves to exhaustion and bragging about their deprivation. It can get toxic very quickly.
I am really glad you brought that up, because fasting has definitely been hijacked by extreme biohacking culture. More is not always better. Biology demands balance, not punishment. If you push fasting too hard, especially if you have underlying medical conditions, metabolic instability, a history of eating disorders, or chronic stress, you are not triggering healthy adaptation, you are just causing damage.
Right? It crosses the line from pruning the tree to just chopping the whole thing down.
Exactly. Autophagy is about intelligent adaptation, not self-destruction. It is meant to be a rhythm, a gentle oscillation between abundance and scarcity. It should never be used as a weapon against your own body.
Which makes me wonder where we go from here. We cannot rewind evolution, and we are certainly not going back to hunting and gathering. But we do have technology. Do you think the future of metabolic health is less about guessing and more about precision?
Absolutely. We are entering an era of true metabolic intelligence. Instead of blindly following a fasting trend you saw online, we will rely on continuous glucose monitors, heart rate variability tracking, and AI-driven wearables. These tools will tell you exactly when your body is primed for a fast and when it desperately needs nourishment and rest.
It is fascinating to think that the technology that currently overstimulates us might actually become the tool that teaches us how to pause. Because wearables do not actually improve health on their own, do they? It is the interpretation of that data that matters.
That is the ultimate truth. It will shift fasting from a rigid ideology into personalized biological intelligence. We will finally be able to understand our own unique rhythms rather than forcing our bodies into arbitrary templates.
I love that perspective. It all comes back to that core concept of cellular silence. Modern civilization has taught us to fear the quiet. We fill every single void with food, with information, with noise. But maybe we need to realize that emptiness is not a void to be filled. It is the necessary space where repair actually begins.
That is a beautiful realization. We spend so much time trying to heal ourselves by adding things, more supplements, more complex diets, more interventions. But sometimes healing does not come from adding without more. Sometimes true healing only begins when the noise finally stops.